Hello, and welcome to Poetry in Our Town, a video series where we explore the power of words and their impact on the people who live, work, and play in our community. My name is Lisa Mulrooney, and I am the first Poet Laureate for the town of Stony Plain. Today, I have the great pleasure of welcoming Chantelle Laberge. Chantelle, thank you for being here.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Good, thanks. Good. And I'd like to tell everybody a little bit about you, Chantelle. I've got to know Chantelle quite well over the last 2 years, as in her position with the town, Chantelle oversees the role of Poet Laureate. She is the Culture and Tourism Development Officer for the town of Stony Plain. And for over 15 years, she has worked in community and economic development with a focus on arts and culture, tourism, and rural entrepreneurship. Prior to moving to Alberta in 2014, Chantelle worked in Peterborough, Ontario, for various organizations, including the City of Peterborough and Fleming College. In her current role, she is responsible for implementing Stony Plain's Arts, Culture and Heritage Action Plan, Tourism Business Development, and Destination Marketing. That's quite the portfolio, Chantelle.
Yes, it's diverse for sure.
So aside from overseeing my position as the Poet Laureate for the town of Stony Plain, you've been involved in lots and lots of different projects. I know a little bit about some of them, but I'm sure there's far more than what I know about, and maybe than what a lot of people know about. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit maybe about some of your favorites, some of the ones that have stayed with you that you're particularly proud of.
Sure. So basically this role encompassed in the Arts, Culture and Heritage Action Plan is the public art policy and management of that program, which includes the murals in Stony Plain. And one of the things I'm most proud of under that portfolio in particular is actually the writing of the public art policy. So many communities across Canada and other places have public art policies which dedicate a certain amount of funding to go towards public art. And generally they're tied to capital projects only. And so when I was writing the public art policy, I wanted to figure out a way that we could include public art in neighborhoods where there isn't any new capital building happening. So older, already established neighborhoods, for example, or places like parks or along the trail system. So we wrote the public art policy to include annual funding that comes from the operational budget. It's not a huge amount, it's 0.1% of our operating budget, but that allows me to do public art in places where people may not be expecting it. So it's not tied to a giant new building or a big capital project, but it can be, like I said, along the trail system. So I'm particularly proud of that because it's a bit of an anomaly. Not a lot of communities have a policy like that. And it just gives us freedom to put art wherever we want, basically. And so an example of that is a project that we're working on right now, which is a public art bench project, which will be going at the intersection of two trails in the community in a highly utilized on a highly utilized part of the trail system. And it will speak to the idea of physical distancing, but with the ability to come back together in a way where we can be with each other. So the way the bench is designed, and people will see this when it's unveiled, you can visit but be distanced from each other as well. So that's one project. And then the other one that people might not know as part of my portfolio is summer sessions, which I'm particularly pleased with how that's grown over the last 7 years. We started Summer Sessions as a concert series held in a downtown park. And we started that, as I said, 7 years ago. And I think there was like 10 people at the first concert. And then that whole season, I think the most we had that whole season was like 60 people or something. And we've grown that project over the last years to, I think in the last season, we had over 4,000 people at the 8 concerts. So
Wow.
I'm really proud of that, and how people have embraced the opportunity to come out on a weekday or weekday evening, I guess, and just be in the park and hear some live music and visit with their community and their neighbors. So I really love that project, and I hope that we can continue it for many years to come.
Well, that's awesome. I think what I particularly am impressed by is how it's part of your mandate to make art so accessible to everybody and to everybody in our community. And I think that's pretty amazing. So that's awesome. Now, this video series, of course, is about making poetry accessible too. And I know that you have brought along a poem to share with us. So I wonder if you could give us a little bit of a tease or a little bit of an explanation about why you picked these particular words to share with us.
So I chose this poem because it reminds me, one, to be present in my life and remember that there's a reason why we are doing the things we're doing and living the life we're living. But it also reminds me to have blue sky moments and just take time to think about what could be if I let it. So oftentimes I think we get caught up in the day-to-day running, and I was going to say doldrums of the day-to-day, but it's not always that dreary. But just the running and you know, the busyness of being working and family and all of that. And this just reminds me to take a minute to breathe and think about what else is possible.
Well, whenever you're ready, we'll look forward to hearing it.
Okay. So this poem is called Dreams, and it's by Langston Hughes. And it's simple and short. But here we go. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. That's it.
That was beautiful and beautifully read.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chantelle. Now, I asked you earlier if you've dabbled in poetry yourself, and you told me that you're not such a creative yourself, but you obviously you're into the business of managing the works of arts, and so you come across creative work and creative people all the time. And I was going to ask you a little bit about how you are touched by particular things that you see, and how you know that something is worth sharing. Because, you know, a lot of us, we sit back and we read poetry, or we look at a piece of art and we think, oh, I like that, but we can't always articulate why it is that we feel moved or touched by it. And I wonder, as somebody who's probably given a lot more thought to that than many people, perhaps you could give us some insight into how you recognize a good or great piece of art.
I think it's different for everybody. Art is super subjective, and everyone has a different idea of what it means to them. But I think for me, there's two things I look for, and they're really polar opposites of each other. The first thing is it relatable? And so for me, it's really easy to just walk past things that you may see in the community, art or otherwise, and not give them a second glance. But if they're relatable, then you might look at it and think, oh, well, that speaks to me because it reminds me of my grandmother, or it reminds me of my favorite colors, or like, it can be super simple, right? So that's the first thing, is it relatable? But then the polar opposite of that for me is, does it make me ask questions? So if it's not relatable to me, why? What was the artist, why was it relatable to the artist, or how is it relatable to the community, or and how can I look at it from a perspective that it makes sense to me, even if it's not relatable to my lived experiences. So that's really how I look at projects, from two places, and if it fits either one of those, and I think that it can fit either one of those for the people of Stony Plain, that's sort of how we move those things forward.
That's really interesting, actually. I know that a lot of times we'll come across a piece of artwork or something we read and we don't understand it, and I think that sometimes it's worth giving things a second glance and thinking, am I still curious about it? Even though I don't understand it, yeah. Is it still driving some curiosity in me? So that makes a whole lot of sense. Now, before we close off for today, I was wondering if you had some words of wisdom or a quote that you'd like to share and leave people with today.
So this is in Latin. So I will preface this by saying I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but it speaks to, similarly to the poem that I read earlier about just having dreams or having hope. And it's something that I came across a few years ago when I was in a particularly rough spot in my life. And I think about it often if I'm having a tough time or feel lost or hopeless, for lack of a better way to put it. And it simply is dum spiro spero. And it translates to, in breath, there is hope, or while I breathe, there is hope. And again, it just reminds me to be present and thankful for the life that I have, and that if it's a bad time right now, there's got to be better times ahead.
That's right. Well, thank you so much. That's a perfect way for us to leave today. Thanks so much, Chantelle.
Thanks, Lisa.